Several states have been mumbling about leaving the Union, most recently California and Texas. Heck, even my home state, Michigan, has had its own mumblings about secession from Uncle Sam. Whole regions have espoused secession. Whether the reasons have risen to the point where actual action will be taken is still open to discussion. Many have offered to invite California to leave the Union, since it has little understanding or desire to act as part of the United States. If California does not leave, there is a sincere discussion about splitting into several states, with names already chosen for the various parts, some of them not repeatable in mixed company. Maybe I have a couple of ideas that may settle down secession talks and give all the states more control over their own territory. This deserves a good talk about. Hello, anyone. I'm Scott Boehm. They call me the old farmer. When we lived at the previous house, I threatened several times to secede from the city because it could be called Little California. Qualifications for living in the city is leave your common sense at the border. Stupidity is the ruler in this municipality by far too many quoted educated, unquote, people. Education does not replace common sense. But when we hear of rumblings within various states that some wish to leave this union, it deserves some consideration about what is wrong. Whatever you think of Uncle Joe Biden, you must agree he will never make the top 10 list of best presidents. Such would also be true for Mr. Trump. Both presidents have done some good. But it's not who is president that is the main concern about those wishing to leave the union. It's things like the federal government stepping all over states' rights at the Mexican border, has many up in arms in Texas, with many outside of Texas saying justifiably so. Some may say that the federal government is treating the states like a rented mule. If you know the saying, you will understand. If you don't know the saying, it's not important. The problem is the federal government has ridden roughshod over the states as bad as it does with some third world countries, leaving some to claim, enough is enough, I want out. Let's see if I can come to some kind of state aid that will return to the state the legal power granted by the Constitution, by shoving the federal government back a couple of notches. The first way is something that even the federal government wants to see happen: eliminate the IRS. Instead of the IRS, the Treasury departments, plus the governors of each state, we have to include the governors because of gubernatorial ego, become the total tax collectors for everyone, even local government. This is how I see it happening: a 10% tax without deduction sent to the state treasury. Things have gotten out of hand where the various governments have shoved their responsibilities onto others. As an excellent example, only the state treasury should be able to collect taxes from U.S. citizens and companies. No matter how it's stated, many states are making private business collect sales tax. Two problems with this. First, it interferes with private business and such transactions that are carried out. Second is that government has no business making private enterprise the collector of tax. There have been so many different definitions of what is happening with sales tax. The fact is that private business becomes a tax collector for government. This should not be. What should happen is the most simplified form of tax collection that reduces tax collection costs and allows citizens to know exactly how much tax they are paying. No one knows how much tax they are currently paying. This is wrong. To simplify everything and to eliminate the IRS and undo the control that the federal government has over states, I propose this solution. Any other approach is labor-intensive and can create black markets, such as using the VAT tax found in Europe. I call it a hat tax system instead of a VAT system. Hidden added tax instead of value-added tax. Already they're trying to raise the tax rate. My tax system I call 10% for all. Let me explain my plan. The state treasury collects all taxes with one check. They divide up the tax for all the separate venues. The tax money will be broken down in this manner. The federal government gets 2%, the state gets 4%, with county 2%, local and schools get 1% each. There will not be any other taxes assessed citizens. No property, no sales tax, no luxury tax. There will be no service fees for collecting the taxes at the state. Now, they may hold on to this money for no more than 90 days before dispersal. The interest earned will be the payment for the handling fee. If folks don't make enough money, they don't pay taxes. You either pay or you don't. As an example, anyone making less than $25,000 a year would not have to pay taxes. Anytime you run money through the government, there's at least a 10% waste, more likely up to 50% waste. So let's take care of the needy this way. Any additional help will come from the charities, which having the local people know you are on the dole is an excellent incentive to get off of charity. At the same time, we abolish the Federal Reserve. It's not a part of government. It has no business being involved with the valuation of money or the making of money. There is no constitutional amendment to allow for a privately held central bank. Not only are they gone, they pay back every dollar with interest to the federal government that they have taken. Currently, the way it works is the federal treasury says it needs more money. The Federal Reserve waves a magic wand and poof, creates the needed money that is loaned to the federal government at interest. The federal treasury can poof just as good as the feds, without having to pay back the money with interest. So make the feds pay back all the money at interest plus penalties for causing most of the recessions and depressions, including the Great Depression of the 1930s. They are the cause of it. Actually, there are a whole number of people that should go to jail. Instead, we take their wealth, leaving them enough to buy beans and bread. Also, without the Federal Reserve in place, it's much harder for the United States to be involved in wars. The money wouldn't be available to do so. Currently, the Constitution says that the currency of the United States will be gold and silver. As far as I can see, this has not changed. In fact, each state can coin their own money from gold and silver. It is allowed in the Constitution. So let's do it maybe by regions. I could see the Great Lakes states come together and create GLS currency. Texas already has its own currency. By having only a true employee of the state treasury, not a temp or a subcontractor, as well as the governor as the only legal tax collectors, all other taxes would become illegal, and you will know how much tax you actually paid. This will also eliminate the federal government waving money in front of the states in such a manner as to cede to the federal government states' rights for the bribe. Most times this happens without due process of a public vote. In addition, the Constitution says due process for laws and regulations. Without congressional vote, such regulations are actually illegal. No due process. This all could be taken care of with a simple constitutional amendment to block the federal government from bullying the states and citizens. All regulations not specifically passed by due process through Congress and signed by the President as individual bills should be made illegal. Regulations usurp due process of law and should be considered unconstitutional. If need be, we pass another amendment stating so in very specific language. At the same time, the meaning of the words in the Constitution must stay without changing the interpretation of these words. An example of redefining words is Pluto is no longer a planet. Granted, this is not a legal thing whatsoever, but it's happening to the laws. The words have meaning, so the courts are changing the meaning of the words to meet their agenda. This is why the meaning of the words in the Constitution must be locked down. These acts will return to the states the rights granted them by the Constitution, and again limits the control that the federal government has over the states and the citizens of this country. In fact, unless you're doing business across state lines, There should be no contact with the federal government by a citizen of the United States. By eliminating the flow of money to Washington and then back to the states will again have the rights afforded them from the Constitution. In other words, state aid is gone. The federal government would be reduced to only those acts granted within the Constitution and no other rights. Here is an interesting idea about voting. I hear that the state of Maine has an interesting way to vote. Let's say you can vote for 3 candidates. Your first choice would get 3 votes. Your second choice would get 2 votes. Your third choice would get 1 vote. Now count up the number of votes a candidate has. Interesting idea, isn't it? I would say that amendments would be in order so as to lock down the federal government from continually overreaching their authority. In fact, I would like to see a constitutional amendment that mandates 10% for all taxes so that we don't have tax creep like Europe has with their VAT tax. It's the citizens through the states and by elections that we, the people, will again take control of our government, instead of the government controlling us.
Thank you for watching. And please be safe.
We'd sure appreciate it if you could subscribe and leave a comment. You know how YouTube behaves. They won't believe you watched a video unless you leave a comment. Also, it would help if you ring the bell and do a thumbs up. As you know, if I find a good channel, I pass it on to you. So if you think it's appropriate, it would sure help if you passed us on to your closest 10,000 friends and family. But above all, give a helping hand to someone today. It's the best gift to give. It'll make you feel good too.
Don't forget to click like, subscribe, share, or ring the bell buttons on the Original Old Farmer channel. We enjoy reading the comments that you leave, and they do help the channel, so keep them coming. And once again, thank you for watching The Original Old Farmer.
The VFW National Home for Children, providing families of veterans and active duty military opportunities for growth and development in a nurturing community. Please consider a donation to help their children and families. I.C. Rhodes speaking.